Alrighty. So today we're going to be speaking with Brad Rosen, president at Sales Assembly. And prior to Sales Assembly, he was over at G2 Crowd, leading the RevOps organization. Sales Assembly offers go-to-market training for tech sales teams. And I'm really excited to have Brad on today, just given the product space that we're building in at Wiser and how we think about sales methodology and sales coaching. So really been looking forward to this conversation. Brad, thank you so much for joining us today.
Yeah, glad to be here and excited to chat about a few topics in this area. Like you said, we do go to training for go-to-market teams on the revenue side, and that's specifically focused on BDRs, AEs, CSMs, and leadership. And so what we really see is that we're able to really focus on skills and skill development for those reps. And so when we go to market, we're really focused on talking to sales leadership as well as enablement folks to try and get in touch with them and help them understand where they might be able to fully augment their enablement function or supplement their enablement function. So for us, a lot of that is actually providing value. We produce a lot of content because we have 250 live events a year. So we tap into that content to be able to really get a hold of our potential buyers and our prospects. And I think you're seeing a lot of that across the board from all of our member companies. We talk about strategies and how they're seeing value and how they're actually going to market these days. And I think a lot of it is providing value adds, whether that's through content, through LinkedIn posts, being able to show like you're a thought leader in a specific space so that people want to learn more, as opposed to just let me blast 1,000 emails a day and hopefully somebody will respond.
And as a sales training organization, what does your sales team structure look like? Do you employ SDRs and AEs to be selling the Sales Assembly product or service as a whole? What does that look like?
We're a bootstrap profitable business, and we were doing that before it was in vogue for many years now. And what that teaches you is to be really thoughtful about your time and resources. And so we'd been selling that founder-led sale for a long time, and we started to scale up probably, I guess what you would say, at the inopportune time of about a year and a half ago. So as things were starting to turn, we did try and bring on some outsourced things. We brought on some sales reps. And what we recognized was whether it was timing or our go-to-market motion, we actually found it's most impactful to grow from the bottoms up and keep that founder-led sale. So that's our go-to-market motion. And that allows us to be really close to the deals. And then additionally, really close to the customers after they're already brought on. And I think that's a big issue with many sales organizations is you treat the transaction as two separate things. It's like you talk to a salesperson, they get handed off, maybe even to a third person, which could be implementation, and then now to your CSM/AM team. And that customer journey just doesn't feel great when you're on the other side of it. Somewhat by design, somewhat by necessity, we stay in touch with our deals and we're really thoughtful about who we're bringing on and how we're making sure that they're seeing comprehensive, cohesive customer journey on the other side.
Yeah, when it comes to that customer journey, I'm curious how the go-to-market motion has changed overall, especially since your time back at G2 Crowd. Did you have a similar approach at G2 Crowd with that customer journey, trying to make sure that it wasn't a separated transaction? Or how is it a little bit different there?
Yeah, that was the goal. I guess it depends on who you ask. But no, it was a very different go-to-market motion. You can obviously look it up. We were very much a VC-backed, still are. That G2 is still very much focused on that. Now, I think they're obviously trying to become profitable and hit the rule of 40 and everything else everybody wants to be these days. But we grew, we'd raise money, we'd figure out how to grow even faster and raise more money and continue that loop, which at the time worked well. And so we went with it. So what that meant was we did have an outbound BDR team that were doing a lot of calls and emails, getting people on the horn. We had a full marketing team that was trying to drive inbounds, obviously, through different channels, paid, social, brand. And then they would hand off to an AE team. The AE team would hand off to implementation, hand off to CS. And so even with the best intentions, it's very hard to keep that cohesive customer journey. And I think that's part of an issue of how you train, right? Training on what should the person be selling, what questions should they be asking, and then how do you get that information transfer internally so that the customer doesn't feel like it was a straight handoff? It's like when you call Comcast and they say, type in your phone number and they bring up all these things. And then you get on the phone with a person finally, right? And they're like, So tell me your name and your address. And I'm like, I literally just told the machine this. Like, why does it not? Maybe they're double checking. I don't know, but it doesn't feel great as a customer like that. The same thing if, in the best of cases, our sales reps are going through Medic or Bant or whatever. They're really qualifying a customer, hopefully. And then your CSM gets on and says, so tell me about your business problems. And so I just went through a 2-month sales cycle talking about that. You should know my business problems.
Yeah. Do you think that's changed over the last 10 years, that idea of context sharing across the different sales individuals that you're speaking with, from SDR to AE to IM to CSM and AM? How has that changed?
I think it's gotten more challenging, and now maybe hopefully it's reverting, but I think it's gotten more challenging because you have more tools. 10 years ago, you had a handful of tools, and maybe everybody used, let's call it Salesforce, right? 10 years ago. So if you wanted the notes that were in there, you probably had some process to be able to have a handoff meeting or at least put it in a certain field. And then we started to bloat the tech stack. And so the BDRs are using one tool, and the CSMs are using another tool, and the AEs are using another tool, or they're all using the same tool but different fields. And so it got very complicated. Now the hope is, there's a lot more platforms, and so ideally you're using only a handful of tools and they integrate relatively well. And then AI, right? That should be the crux here, is we should be able to have a better understanding of what conversations happened and what the next steps are and how we can provide value, ideally across the customer journey.
Yeah, and for sales leaders listening to this, thinking about how they can consolidate those different point solutions, do you have any advice for them as they go out and look at the different platforms that are available to do this, for just navigating that world? When I look at sales tools, it's almost like you need to be an expert in navigating sales tools in order to get what you want.
I mean, the first is it helps everybody to fully understand what your true ICP is and not just going after everybody. Because if you think of what ICP entails, not only does it entail like the fact that somebody has a higher propensity to buy, but also a higher propensity to renew and upsell. And if you can get like your CSMs and AEs and BDRs all in one understanding of what your true ICP is, that's going to help, because you're solving a lot of the same business problems over and over, and you have stories to tell, and you have ways that you're helping other customers with those same business problems, versus like jumping from healthcare to financial services to SaaS to construction. Like, it's just a very choppy way to try and show value. The second I would say is like less is more. So whether that means utilizing more platform services with different solutions within it, then it's easier as far as integrations and things, or being okay with the fact that not everything has to be fully automated. Not everything has to have a platform to it. You can use Google Sheets. You can get 70% of what you need maybe out of your CRM, and you don't need a separate solution. You look at Salesforce continues to acquire people. HubSpot has tons of endpoint solutions that, for payments or signatures or any call recording, like they do all kinds of stuff. And maybe it's not as good as a true endpoint solution, but maybe it's good enough. And that the value there is the ease of use, the ease of integration, and the ability to transfer that data from one team to the next.
Yeah. And you mentioned really nailing down your ICP as the start of this. How would you recommend sales leaders nail down their ICP and track the pain points that they're hearing from those prospects in the field?
I think you really have to do third-party discovery there. When you're getting feedback, like one and loss analysis, both parts, you can trust your reps, but I think that's hard, because a lot of times reps are saying what's self-serving and what they're hearing versus what like a customer actually believes. And so I think doing win-loss analysis is super important to understand where you're hitting the mark and where you're not. And then obviously data, like tracking the trends, understanding what certain industries or company sizes or pain points you're actually solving for, and then being able to say, all right, let's work backwards and then target those folks specifically. And that ties into what we were talking about, that outreach idea. Instead of outreaching everybody, outreach on a specific, like we said, industry, company size, pick your firmographic information, and then you can be very tailored with your recommendations and say, a lot of companies like yours are seeing these problems and this is how we've helped solve them. That resonates a lot better than, I got this amazing tool.
Yeah. And then going to the point of, a lot of these platforms are offering these different endpoint solutions that can check the box for a lot of the different problems that sales teams are having. For a startup that's trying to break into this space, Do you have any recommendations for them, for a startup such as Wiser that hasn't been around long enough to be a platform that's trying to break into the sales productivity space?
Yeah. I think for startups, the key is getting those core users at the start and then being able to understand what problem they're actually solving like really well and then focusing on that one problem. You can't have too many things that you're trying to do at once. Have a really strong value proposition that you can go and find your product market fit with. And those core customers are going to be your best outbound motion. And we talked a little bit about that, but tapping into their network and the people that they know and getting case studies from them, that's where you're going to start to see. You got to get that home base and then build out from there. So I think that's crucial because what people tend to forget is there's this platform. How could I go compete with HubSpot or Salesforce? There's a million companies out there that use tools that don't even know half of what Salesforce or HubSpot could do, right? You could go focus on a solution that's geared towards the construction industry or the automotive industry or some of these other industries that are not nearly as disrupted by technology as we in SaaS tend to think. We're like, oh, that's table stakes. We all know about it. But there's tons of other industries, restaurants. You can think about it just in your daily life where you can make a big impact to somebody that's not necessarily already familiar with all the tools out there.
Mhm. So it sounds like you shouldn't stray away or be afraid of those platform solutions just because there's always going to be additional market opportunity there. And a lot of the customers view those platform solutions as an iceberg where they're only getting, or at least they're using them as an iceberg, where they're only using the tip of that iceberg when there's really quite a bit of functionality underneath the hood.
By the way, if the platform is doing it, that's a validation point. That means that like people need it and want it. Otherwise, they wouldn't have built it themselves. And secondarily, if you can build up a really wonderful technology and a great customer base, maybe the platform wants to buy you at some point. So those are not bad things that the platform is investing in those. And it reduces your need to do education, right? The hard part about coming up with new technology is that you have to educate the market as to what it is and why it's important. If the large platforms are doing that for you, and then you just need to swoop in and say, I'm cheaper, I'm better, I'm easier to work with, I'll provide you better service because, hey, it's me, Corey, like I'll call you versus some random CSM living in Tuscaloosa, like maybe that's a better experience for them. There's a million ways to differentiate yourself versus the large players.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I want to transition the topic a little bit. I'm curious, based off what you've seen in the market, where are sales leaders focusing going into this next quarter?
Yeah, I think right now it's back to the idea of we need to start to grow again. I think last year was just a really big reset, probably in a healthy way. Unfortunately, obviously, a lot of folks lost jobs and didn't make as much money as they wanted, and any number of things that come, the challenges that come along with that. But a healthy reset as far as expectations, I would say, and really saying, all right, what can we actually do this year? And how can we actually go to market? So hopefully you've gotten that kind of out of your system, but now it's back to we need to grow, maybe not as ambitiously as we had planned 2 or 3 years ago, but we still need to get back to it and be efficient while doing it. So most people I would say are focused on how are we going to build our pipeline? How are we going to make sure that the team that we have here is efficient as possible and driving results. And I think that efficiency is really how people are starting to look at it. Like how much revenue are we bringing in per employee? How much revenue are we bringing in per rep? Whether that's thinking about like quota to OTE, people want their teams to drive value in every way.
Yeah, that makes sense. And it resonates with what we heard on the last podcast with Baz. And I'm curious, it sounds like you're talking about unit costs per additionally acquired customer. What are some of the strategies that you see teams putting in place today in order to get a handle on those unit costs?
I do think that people probably already have reduced a lot of the cost, right? They've turned off the tools they're not using. They've probably cut their team in certain respects. And so now the idea is like, how do we make the rest of the team efficient? And so it's probably about growing pipeline. But what we're actually seeing is a lot of the idea that actually conversion rates are probably going up. It's just that you're not filling the funnel at the top as much as you would have in years past. So like you don't have this 5x pipeline coverage or 2x weighted pipeline coverage or what you would have hoped for. Maybe you have 3 or 4x of pipeline coverage, but you're closing it instead of at a 10% rate, you're closing at a 14% rate. And so the numbers add up. Now that's good. And obviously from a perspective of you're not wasting your time on deals, as many deals that you're not going to close. But it is more challenging because you just don't have that backup. What you used to say is, hey, I lost this deal because things happen. Don't worry, I got this other deal that I can pull in. There's just not as much backup to be able to have that cushion if you are missing on certain revenue metrics.
Interesting. And are you seeing tools out there and teams actually adopting these tools where it allows for reps to book additional revenue per month that exceeds the 2021 expectations?
I think you'll see reps being able to do that if you think of the fact that there's probably one, you could say, if you're saying more revenue, if they're reducing the team sizes, that inherently makes an individual's book who's left better because you're being able to consolidate the accounts. And we talked about the ICP. All of a sudden, if I go from 20 reps down to 14, the best accounts are going to rise to the top. And that's what your 14 that are left are going to focus on. And so I think it's about that focus and about saying, okay, now we're going after the best of the best accounts. We're going to put into place the best outreach tactics and the best ways to get a hold of these folks. We're going to focus everything on that. And that hopefully will allow each specific rep to drive more revenue, though as in total, you may not drive as much because you have less people, but at least you're reducing the customer acquisition cost.
I'm curious what you're seeing sales teams doing in terms of enhancing their team's productivity.
This thing is trying to find warm leads. And so the few things that we're seeing that are like top of the list. Number one is finding people that are moving roles, tracking changes, something like a user gems and other tools. You really, if you can get somebody, if they're your main point of contact, that's obviously the best case scenario. They're your main point of contact. They move to another company. Now, you got to look out for the churn on the other side, but they move to another company. You call them up and say, hey, we already know each other. Are you interested in this next company? Wonderful opportunity. But it doesn't have to be that main point of contact. It could be a power user. It could be somebody even who's just like remotely understands what you do and has heard of your company. Hey, could you possibly, I saw you just went over to this other company. Can you give me an introduction to the VP of sales or the head of enablement or whoever you're selling to? That's a wonderful way to get in touch with people because it's not this random product where they don't know anything about. It's a warm introduction, right? Second is definitely referrals and partnerships, finding people that will give you an introduction or find ways to build, events. We shared a lot of dinners with folks, other organizations, and they're bringing people, we're bringing people. It's introducing them in a lightweight fashion. That's not this hard sell. It's just, let's get a bunch of really great CROs in a room and have some dinner and we'll see where it goes from there. So we've seen a lot of success in that. And then the social play, dark social, and just continuing to add value on LinkedIn. You'd be shocked at how many people will reach out to sales someone and say, we saw your content on LinkedIn. Our CEO and CRO, Matt and Jeff, post a ton, myself as well. And so we really try and use that as a crux of getting our name out there and then letting people come to us, or at least when we reach out, they say, oh yeah, I've heard of you. I know who you are. And so trying to get that familiarity as opposed to going in totally cold is really the key in how you're driving efficiency. And that doesn't have to be an executive, by the way. A sales rep can be posting, I just saw this email work or this didn't work, and just posting insights. You'd be surprised at how many people, they may not interact with your posts, but at least they've seen them and are familiar.
Yeah. And I've been trying to get myself over that hurdle as well of posting on LinkedIn. I'm curious if you have any recommendations for me as I'm trying to break into LinkedIn posting or resources out there that can make people more comfortable with that.
Two things. One, have a point of view. Posting about a specific thing and yourself, obviously, talking about AI, talking about really understanding what makes a great sales call and how people are able to follow up and what are the things that your technology is going to be able to help. Now, it doesn't always have to be self-serving, but it's obviously surrounded around the problem that you're trying to solve and pointed at the people that you're trying to sell to, because then people will know you, Corey, as the person who's really thinking about that. That's one. And two, you can't get discouraged. Oh, I only had 7 likes or 15 likes or whatever. Everybody has those, right? But if you consistently post, and that's the number one piece of advice, just consistently post. If that's once a day, if that's twice a week, whatever, just set it up and say, I'm going to post every Tuesday and Thursday. I'm just going to do it. and you'll build yourself up, and you'll be surprised. You'll build an audience, but not just yourself. You have to also engage with others. You got to leave comments, and that's where other people say, oh, who is that? What do they do? You'd be shocked at how many times I'll see somebody comment on a common connection, and I'll say, what is Wiser? I didn't even know what that was. And they're clicking on your website. Again, I may not hit request a demo, but at least I know who you are. And then somebody comes up somehow in conversation with one of my clients who says, we're really looking for this tool that's doing AI behind the call. Got just the person.
We're coming up on time here. I wanted to ask you, when you think about co-pilots versus autopilots, where do you see the biggest opportunities in sales today, whether that be with SDRs, with AEs, and where do you see teams actually adopting today? So where do you see it coming in the future, and where do you see efficiencies being implemented today?
Yeah. I'd say right now the biggest efficiencies are making sure that things aren't getting dropped and you're being able to take some of those insights and have them available for the rest of the team or for follow up afterwards and being able to actually drive that action. One of the first aha moments for us was like, yeah, seeing a summary just done by AI after a call it doesn't sound it doesn't sound like that monumental, but it really is, because otherwise you either wouldn't have typed that up or you would have typed it up and missed a bunch of things. And it's, at least now we can refresh our memory, or another executive could jump in and see what happened in the call, or a CSM team can understand the context of a bunch of calls before that. So that seems like a very low lift, but it's something that's providing value. And I think in the future, you mentioned co-pilot versus autonomous. I do think that there's opportunities for autonomous, but I also believe that you still have to teach a person to fish. And having these ideas of we're just going to tell you what to say, I think is interesting, but you also want the person to be able to react, because ultimately a sales call is fluid. You don't know what they're going to answer. And it's not always, you don't always have that answer as a list of bullets of things that you've pre-thought of, right? There's situations are always different. Everyone always says that, right? Oh, I was really interested in a call recording tool, but my product's different. Everybody's product somehow always, right? So let me tell you my product's different. Okay. But handling that objection and or learning how it actually is different is what makes you, the salesperson, more efficient than the average salesperson, because you say, oh, you know what, that's really interesting. I have another client over here that's done it like that. Or I never thought about that. Tell me more, right? Or let me connect with somebody else. And that's the part that you're never going to automate. You can't automate somebody thinking on the fly, the impromptu discussion that you're going to have, and then the ability to change that conversation and be able to drill into the actual problem. And so that's where I think AI can take us to a point where we're more efficient. We're not forgetting things. We're able to document things in a much better way. But I don't want to talk to a machine, right? I want to talk to a person. And so how do you make that person more efficient through machine learning? That's the key.
Yeah. And for SDRs and AEs out there, are there any things that they can be doing outside of just the number of calls that they're having to improve those skills, their ability to navigate the questions and the conversations that they're having with customers that ends up being much like an art? What would you recommend they do to improve on those skills outside of just the repetition?
Listen to other people's calls and ask for feedback. I think a lot of times, especially when you're working remotely, you lose that osmosis. You lose that, wow, that was my buddy over here just said that really well. I'm going to try that next time. Or getting the feedback after the call. Hey, how'd you think that went? Yeah, I thought you did well, but here's how I would change it. Now, you can listen to call recording. It's just harder, right? Because you have to be intentional about it. You have to go through, you have to find those moments that are teaching and learning moments. But as a rep, I'd be submitting calls to my peers, submitting calls to my leadership to ask for feedback, even to send it to the CEO and just say, here are a call of mine. Don't make it your best call ever. Make it like middle of the road. Maybe not the one you bombed, but like middle of the road. Hey, CEO, what do you think? What can I do better? And I think that's the best way, because they're going to give you ideas that are different perspectives. And send it outside of the sales organization. Send it to a product leader or one of your friends at a different company. Hey, how would this have been received? Or a mentor, somebody that isn't in the group think of your own company, really helps to illuminate like opportunities for you.
Interesting. I hadn't thought about that before. I definitely would have appreciated that back at Rippling, getting videos from sellers saying, hey, here's how we're talking about the product. What do you think? What would you change about this? What are we doing? Brad, I really appreciate this. I want to give you an opportunity just to give one plug really quickly to Sales Assembly, if there's anything else about it that the viewers or listeners should know. But yeah, thank you so much for your time.
Yeah, sure. If anybody's looking for go-to-market training for your, like I said, BDRs, AEs, CSMs, AMs, or frontline leaders, 250 live courses a year, an always-on enablement function to help you out with. But it was great to join you, Corey, and looking forward to promoting this and sharing it with the world.
Awesome. Sounds great. Once again, Brad Rosen, president over at Sales Assembly. Thank you again for your time, Brad.